Oh, yeah. What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 24 of the Say the Jerry podcast. My name is Matt Cothran, and before we go any further, ladies and gentlemen, let's just take a little time out to say to everybody out there listening and watching, happy Thanksgiving. I hope everyone's having an awesome day with their friends and their family, being appreciative and grateful. What an awesome day to release a podcast episode. So, I'm thankful for music, for life, for love, for family and friends. And, I hope everybody out there is having an awesome day. Let's just get right into the episode. This was one of my favorite conversations that I've ever had in my life. I've known Dennis for a while now, and he's an incredible dude. So I'm just going to shut the fuck up and get to the good stuff. It's time for episode 24. Dennis Lyxzén is a rebel with a cause. In this episode, we catch up with a revolutionary frontman to discuss his life in sonic demonstration. From the early days of Step Forward and Refused to the international noise conspiracy, AC4, INVSN, and the latest project, Fake Names. This episode is jam-packed with rad stories and musical insight from what I believe is one of counterculture's greatest voices. So get out your paper and get out your pen, because it's time to take notes. Sit back, relax, pour yourself some Sailor Jerry, and let's go. Hey, what's up, Dennis? How are you?
Good. How are you? What's happening?
I'm doing great, man. It's good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, man, it has. I think the last time I saw you was Refused Hives down in San Diego. That was a couple of years ago now, I think.
Yeah,
man. How you how you holding up?
I'm all right.
Yeah. It's been crazy, man. It's been crazy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on the Sailor Jerry podcast. Looking forward to catching up with you, man. It's crazy. I was kind of going through everything, getting ready for the interview, getting ready for the conversation, and I forgot how much goddamn music you put out over the years, man. It's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
I've done my fair share of music, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So let's just dive into it. I mean, you seem like one of those guys that kind of came out of the womb with the tambourine, so to speak. You know what I mean? When did music kind of kick off for you?
When I was 9 years old. I mean, my dad listened to a lot of music, but no one in the house played music. But when I was 9 years old, John Lennon got shot and killed. And it was all over the news. And I saw all these photos of the Beatles. And I was like, oh, man, these guys they are the coolest band. So I stole my dad's Beatles records, and that was it. Then I was hooked on music. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So going from the Beatles, how did you kind of step into rock and roll and punk rock and metal and all that stuff? How did that start to take shape for you?
Well, after the Beatles, I got into Bowie. Lyxzén was actually the first record I bought with my own cash, which is, it's a cool record.
That's a good one. Mine was Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue. Definitely not as cool.
not as cool, but you know, it's also a record. And then from Bowie, it's funny because everyone in my class in school, they were into like Kiss and like Deep Purple and heavy metal. And I was not having it. And then I saw the Bark at the Moon video with Ozzy.
Ooh.
And I was like, oh man, this is fucking awesome. So I got into like heavy metal, and being the type of kid that I was, you know, like that whole like Ozzy and Motorhead, and but then being the guy that I was like looking for more extreme stuff. So early on, I got into Slayer and Bathory and Metallica and the whole metal scene, and then from there into like crossover basically, because I was like, I wanted to play music early on, and all the metal I was listening to, they're such masturbators, and I was like, I can't compete with this. And then I discovered crossover and hardcore. I was like, oh, I think this might be more along what I can do, you know. So that's how it went, you know.
Yeah, man. Those you know, solo Ozzy for me is always better. It's always been better than Black Sabbath. It was like Blizzard of Oz and Bark at the Moon. You know, all those records are absolutely so incredible, and they had a huge impact on me too. Ozzy and Joey Ramone, probably my favorite voices of all time, I think. But Ozzy, man, he had such a huge impact on me. And those records, you know, I still remember hearing Blizzard of Oz for the first time. My sister was a crazy metalhead, so her record collection was absolutely insane. So that's how I kind of got into everything. So that's cool, man. And I hear you about the accessibility of hardcore and punk, you know, because I remember listening to like Dio and being like, Dio and Maiden, and being like, man, this is so cool, but this is like a fantasy world. Like, it's like nothing really that I feel like I can reach out and like grab and like actually be a part of. And that's kind of what punk meant to me at that time, getting into it. You know, so step forward. Let's talk about step forward a little bit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you get into hardcore, you get into punk rock. You know, around what time is this? What year is this?
87.
87.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Punk rock and hardcore and kind of I mean, the first love was like Crumbsuckers and Agnostic Front, Victim in Pain, and Cro-Mags, Best Wishes. That whole thing, because it was metal enough, but it was also like punk enough. So it's like that, and the DRI record Crossover, of course, that was great. So we got into that, and then 89, 87, we had a punk band, but it didn't really do anything. It was like the local punk band. And then 89, we started Step Forward, which was like probably the first Swedish straight edge hardcore band. And we were just like, well, let's just rip off Youth of Today and Sick of It All. That's just what it was, you know. And we did 2 demos, and we played a lot of shows like around our home area. And then last year, some madmen from Poland released our 2 demos on vinyl, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Did you ever get a chance to see Youth of Today when they came through or anything like that? Were you able to catch any of the bands when they came through Sweden?
No. Well, no. Well, first of all, I live and lived really far remote from everything. Youth of Today in 1988, they played in Fagersta, you know, south, and I was going. But then my skateboard broke, and I had to make a choice: buy a train ticket to go to Fagersta or buy a new skateboard. And I bought a new skateboard, which is to this day, I'm like, it's a bit of a bummer, you know, but I needed to skate, so I had to like prioritize. Yeah,
I mean, that's a tough decision. You know, that's a tough decision. You can't get too caught up in that. So, you know, with Step Forward, how did you kind of step into the role of being the singer? You know, like when did you first pick up a microphone?
Well, the first punk band we had, I was the bass player, and we started practicing. We didn't have a singer, and then I was like, someone needs to sing, so it became me, because I was like the extrovert one. I was like, I'll sing. So that's kind of how it started. And then when we started Sephora, I was like, I'm not gonna play bass. I'm just gonna sing and kind of go crazy. And that's how it came about. It's interesting because I never saw myself as a singer. I was just like, when you're young, I mean, someone like David from Refused, like when he was young, he was like, like, wonder kid on the drums. All the teachers, everyone was like, yeah, this guy's going to be a musician. When I was young, I was the punk fuck up. I was that kid. Everyone's like, yeah, he's not going to do anything with his life. So me being a singer in a hardcore band was just like, this is something I'll do for a year or two, and then I need to get my shit together, maybe figure out life. And here we are, like, I don't know, many years later, 30 plus years later, and still doing this.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And at that time, were you really, were you kind of critical about, about what you sounded like, or who your influences were vocally or anything like that? Or was it just about having fun? And at that point, were you really, lyrically, where were you at? I mean, obviously you were young as hell. So, so, but what do you look back on in the Step Forward days, and kind of what do you think about your role as a singer and a lyricist and what you were trying to accomplish?
I think that there is a certain sense of like, there's such a sense of alienation where we live, like really far north, and being the small town kid and discovering hardcore. The whole straight edge thing was big, and then I got into it. And Step Forward was very much hardcore, like all those 80s youth crew type of bands where it's like, I'm just going to sing about me being hardcore. You're not hardcore. You don't understand me. That's kind of like the lyrical approach we were going for. I mean, there were some sprinkled political ideas, but that was mostly, it came kind of with the territory. I was into the Dead Kennedys and stuff like that. So you had to be a little bit political, but it was mostly just lip service. I'm just singing about hardcore, basically,
Yeah,
I'm very angry. It's interesting because those first two Step Forward demos, there's a lot of like, you sold me out, like you stabbed me in the back, like you betrayed me. And now I'm looking at the lyrics, I'm like, I don't remember these people. I have no idea who these people are. Like, why was I so angry at these people? And your world is so small because you're just singing about some other guy in your class or some other band or just some bullshit like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back on some of the lyrics I wrote in high school, and it's like some of the most crude stuff I've ever written in my life. I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, what was I thinking back then? But it's funny. It's funny you talking about, like singing about hardcore, because there was like a moment, for me and my friends in school where it was like, okay, we all kind of got into punk. And then it was like, there was a certain fork in the road around Earth Crisis time when, there was a fork in the road around Earth Crisis time when the punkers, they stayed punk. And then there was like friends that went off, straight all the way deep into the hardcore scene. And it was like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Big Wednesday, but it's this old surfer movie about this group of friends. And there's a point in the movie where they all get drafted. And they go to the draft board, and they go to Vietnam, and most of them are faking injuries and pretending to be, wounded in order to get out of the draft or whatever. And a couple of them like sign up and voluntarily go to Vietnam. And it was like kind of like that moment, all the punks were like faking their injuries and like trying to like, do that. And the hardcore guys were just going for it. They were going in. And it was a really funny moment, but that was kind of the way it was at that point. I think there was such, and there always will be such a love and respect for hardcore by the people in hardcore. You know what I mean? And it's like punk kind of has that, but there's not really that scene loyalty, I think, that you get. You know what I mean?
And it's interesting because a lot of people that got so deep into hardcore, we love hardcore still. We kind of hate hardcore at the same time. We're like, yeah, it's super corny. And a lot of that, like that early 90s, what was happening at the time, a lot of it's kind of corny, but at the time it was also quite powerful. And I felt, because I was a punk, like I was into the Dead Kennedys and the Exploited and the Clash, but I was also into the Cro-Mags, But when that whole scene with Earth Crisis and Snapcase and Strife and all those bands, Outspoken, all those bands came, it felt like we were part of something contemporary that was happening. And punk was something old. It's interesting that I got into punk in 87 and Minor Threat back then, because I loved Minor Threat and Bad Brains, but it felt like, oh, that's ancient times. But it was in effect maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, which is fucking crazy now when I think about it. They were only a couple of years removed, but the distance, both like, mentally and actually where we live. So being a part of that whole hardcore scene, it felt like this is actually happening now. It's not retreading something. It's actually happening now, and it's quite powerful to be part of that whole scene and that whole movement. Even though when it came down to it, and we actually started touring with a lot of those bands, we're like, we don't really agree, because we had a very punk attitude about us, but musically we really liked a lot of those bands. But then when we started touring with them, we're like, oh yeah, we're like Europeans, we're like super political. We come from this type of attitude, and a lot of those bands didn't really care about that. It was more about like the sound and the idea of like of hardcore.
Yeah, man. So who, if you had to pick, out of Agnostic Front, out of Sick of It All, out of Youth of Today, who would you put on top of that list?
It's so hard, because Agnostic Front did a couple of records that were phenomenal, really groundbreaking, but they also did a lot of records that I didn't really pay attention to. Sick of It All, I mean, they just kept going. Yeah. They're just one of those bands. I love Sick of It All. We toured with Sick of It All a couple of years ago. They're just one of those bands that's like, here's what we're gonna do until we drop dead, which I really, really, really appreciate. They're fabulous. But I think I have to go with Youth of Today, because that was the band that really like I was into all those bands like Agnostic Front and Cro-Mags and Crumbsuckers. But then when Youth of Today came, and a friend of mine, he called me up because he went to that show in 1988, and he called me up and he said, yeah, Lethal Aggression was great, but Youth of Today, they're fucking straight edge, man. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And I kind of like, what is straight edge? And then, I started reading the lyrics. I'm like, oh, that's straight edge. And I got super into it. So we'll have to say Youth of Today.
Yeah, even honestly, I would say the same. And obviously, nothing but love and respect to, Agnostic Front and Sick of It All. Of course. Obviously. But, there was something about, and, honestly, there was something about Ray's vocals for me that I heard that. And I was like, this dude sounds completely possessed. And I've never, ever, ever, ever heard a singer sound like remotely anything like this. He sounds like a wild animal, just like thrashing around in a cage. And I've always been a huge fan of just super original, just out of the box vocal style. And that guy is that's just him, and the lyrics were so great. And and the energy, dude, I got to see him for the first time at Punk Rock Bowling this last year. I'd never seen him. It was, and they were so good. Yes. They were so good. It was awesome.
Yeah. But it's funny because it's like, I have the same kind of feeling. Like, I'm like, I loved it so much. But then also, Negative Approach was one of my favorite bands back then. So it's a very similar, it's a very Negative Approach vibe to it. But I think the earnesty of the lyrics, it's, as a grown man reading some of the lyrics, I'm like, but when so I was 16, 17, like it really hit me because they were so honest and they're so like earnest and kind of like, and that really hit me. And then Negative Approach was more like, yeah, that's just rough stuff, that's something different. So Youth Today for me really, they really changed course. A lot of what I got into and what I started doing was because of that Break Down the Walls record, basically. Yeah.
Awesome, man. That's cool. Yeah. Shout out Youth of Today for sure. Okay. So Step Forward. When does Step Forward turn into Refused? How does that happen?
It happens late 1991, which is coming up on 30 years ago. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. So we broke up. The drummer, which I started the band, we didn't want to play hardcore anymore. When you're young, you say you're 17. It's so like, he's like, I'm not into hardcore anymore. I'm going to start an indie rock band. You're like, oh shit.
Big mistake.
Yeah,
big mistake.
Big mistake. But then I've met David at that point, and David was, he loved Step Forward. It was like his favorite band. Still is his favorite band. He talks a lot about Step Forward. He was a metalhead, and I think it's like music teacher told him like, you need to come and see this band play. And they were like a cover band. They're really like proficient like musicians. And we played with Step Forward after them. And David just went to see this cover band, and we came on stage, and David was like, oh no, this is what I want to do. So he befriended me, and then we became friends. And then, Step Four broke up, and we're like, well, let's start a hardcore band. And they was like, fuck yeah, I'm game. So 30 years ago, we started playing music together. It's pretty wild.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah.
And what was the the early kind of inception period of Refuse like? I mean, that must have been a blast just getting together and I mean, some of the coolest and most interesting times in a band is forming that bond, finding that chemistry, figuring it all out together, kind of, figuring out your direction, your sound, what you guys have in common creatively, what you don't,
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
stuff. So what was that like?
It was fun, and it was weird because it was like you live in a small town, and when you're young, time moves so quickly, so fast. Like in 2 years you can accomplish so much shit, and now it's like 2 years. Oh yeah, I haven't seen those guys in 2 years. It's like now time stretches in a different way. So in 98 90 91, when we started Refused, it was like the punk scene that's been going on in 89 90 kind of died down. So we didn't have anyone to play with. So the two guys we got to join the band, they weren't punk kids. They were just like, the guitar player was like a metal guy, and the bass player was just some guy we knew. He was only in the first demo. So trying to get them to understand, like, all right, this is what we want to do. Here's our goal. Here's the direction. It's a lot of work because like the guitar player is like, yeah, I love Yngwie Malmsteen. We're like, well, it's not, that's not the direction we're going in. So for the first couple of demos, like I ended up writing a lot of songs. And at that point, I didn't really know how to write songs. But the first show we played, I think we played 3 Gorilla Biscuits covers. Just, why not?
Yeah. That's amazing, man. And so first record comes out in 94, right?
Yes.
First record.
93, the first full length comes out in 93. Yeah.
Okay. And then Songs, The Fan the Flame comes out in 96. And that's when I first heard of you guys, because I was into that's when kind of Burning Hearts first started kind of hitting over in the States.
Yeah.
There was so much cool stuff coming out on Burning Heart in that kind of mid 90s time. What was the scene like in Sweden at that time? Was there a lot of people going to shows? Was there a lot of bands happening? Was it pretty cool?
Yeah, it was a cool scene. It was the funny thing is that whole Burning Heart scene is pretty cool, pretty great. But it was also like when we played shows in Sweden, yeah, we did play Millencolin a couple of times. We played with those guys a couple of times, but it was like, it is like they're more punk and we were more hardcore. So it was like kind of a little bit divided. And later on in life, you're like, yeah, it doesn't really matter that much. But when you're like 21, you're like, oh, this is, but it was a good scene. And it's interesting because now, like, we had youth centers, governmentally run youth centers all over Sweden. So Refuse were like, okay, we're going to tour Sweden, 42 shows in Sweden. And because you played youth centers, every fucking small town, you just played a youth center. There's always a opening band covering Rage Against the Machine or something like that. And then it was fantastic because it was like, and then you had a couple of hot spots, a couple of small towns where they had a huge hardcore scene where there's like a bunch of bands, and you'll come down to a small town outside of Gothenburg, 400 people show up to a show, and it's like all hardcore kids. And we're like, this is fucking wild. So the mid 90s were pretty spectacular in that sense. And then you had that whole, Millencolin and that whole Burning Heart scene. So it was a good time to tour. And I mean, now if you tour Sweden, you're like, yeah, you get 3 shows, that's it. And then you're done touring Sweden. So it really changed because of that culture of youth centers kind of died down a little bit, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, that's a bummer for sure. I remember though, in the States hearing you guys, hearing Millencolin, hearing Satanic Surfers.
Yeah.
I think bands like that they were coming over. It was huge over here. I mean, I don't know if huge might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was big, I mean, yeah. And it was really cool to hear bands, from a completely different side of the planet that, you identified with and that were awesome. So it was a really cool time, for music. And, then we get into, the big dog, Shape of Punk to Come. That comes out 98, which at the time, way ahead of its time. And I know it's been kind of a crazy record for you because I know I've heard you talk about, it's been, obviously it's a record you guys love. It's an incredible record, but it's also been one of those records that at times has been probably hard to step out of the shadow of. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah.
if we can talk about that record a little bit, what was the process going into recording that? Because it was definitely, you guys wanted to do something, you wanted to ramp it up a little bit, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's we toured uh, 95 we did a European tour with Snapcase, and then 96 we did a US tour with Snapcase. They're great. They're super cool guys. They took us on 2 tours, but coming to the States and seeing how that hardcore scene operated, and I mean, 96 we were at our most crusty political. Like I was like, it was kind of wild. Like the stuff we said on stage, we were super radical, super political. We had a lot of backlash, and a lot of people in the States didn't like us being too political, and especially, you know, like, you should be grateful for touring here and not come over, and you can't come to America talking about burning down the Statue of Liberty. That's not cool. And so when we came home from that tour in 96, we were quite jaded, and we were quite confused by the fact that, you know, the political ideas that we had that was very commonplace in Europe and European hardcore didn't really exist in the States. And we're a bit fed up because, you know, we will play shows and there's like huge bros come up to you and like, yeah, we're also straight edge, man. And we're like, well, we got nothing in common, you know. That's so when we came home, we started working on Shape. I think there was a lot of a sense that we needed to break free from whatever that was, and to be like, we need to challenge ourselves and maybe challenge that world, because we felt it was quite rigid. And so that's kind of like the thought process going into it. Like, we just fucking fuck this, you know, like, let's just be our own type of band. And then, you know, one of the things we talked about this a lot, but I mean, in 97, when we were writing and recording that record, the 4 of us were going in different directions. We wanted to do different things. And, you know, for like a magic moment, everything held together and create a record that's pretty fucking wild because of that, because there's 4 people like, all right, we managed to keep it together for this record. And then, I mean, I would say like the record came out, we were done with the record, and that's kind of officially when we were over, but we managed to like tour for like 6 months before it was like, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah, it's it really is, you know, like it's almost up to the gods in a way when you have something like that, where you have, you know, every band member kind of looking in different directions. You
Yeah.
have, you know, all the music trying to come together, the right place, right time, right, you know, right, everything has to happen for that
Yeah.
record to really take shape the way it did. And it's kind of crazy that, you know, in making that record, because it sounds so it really does sound so cohesive, that everyone was kind of in different places, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you hear both of
Yeah.
those things, and
Yeah.
it's really cool. And then so after that comes out, right, you kind of, like you said, you were kind of already done before the record even came out, and then it was just like,
Yeah.
let's just try to do this. And then
Yeah.
touring on that was just was it just a nightmare trying to tour in that first wave?
Yeah, it was horrible. It's like the worst months of my life. Like, because we didn't really, you know, when you're my mindset was like, so here's where I was. I'll show up at the practice space, and the other guys were like working on a riff, and they're like, what do you think about this? I'm like, I do not care. Music is a bourgeois thing. It's only a vehicle for the revolution. And I walked out of the room, and they're like, that guy's fucking an idiot. And then on the flip side, I had this idea about the scene and politics and music. And then you have a guy playing guitar saying like, yeah, I don't care about politics. I just want to rock out. And I mean, you can't get that to gel really. So it was a lot of friction, and a lot of people already kind of mentally checked out, but we're trying. I mean, the record came out, and we're trying, we give it a push. And we did like a couple of European runs. We did a Scandinavian tour. We did some festivals. And then when it was time to come to the States for that Frodo's tour, I mean, we were so done. We didn't talk to each other. I was riding in the Frodo's van because I was like, I don't want to deal with those fucking clowns. So it was not great.
That's so crazy to me. Did you, so when the record was done,
Yeah.
What was the vibe of the band? Were you guys like, this record's great, but I hate you guys? Or was it like, we don't really know if this record's that great or not because we're so clouded about what's just going on in our own lives and what the band is right now? Like, what did you guys, when the record was done, before you even had a chance to look back on it, like, what
Yeah.
did you feel? What were your initial thoughts of it?
My initial thoughts were, the scene's not going to get this. Like the hardcore kids not going to get this record. I understood the pretensions of it, and I was right there writing manifestos and doing crazy shit. But I was like, the hardcore scene that we've been such an integral part of, they're not going to get this. And David just looked at me. He's like, it's a great record. You know, I'm like, all right, cool. So he knew, and I think David and Chris knew, like, this is a great record. I was a bit on the fence. I kind of knew it was a great record, but also maybe this is not what people expect from Refused. The process of making the record was difficult. So I think I was quite disappointed about like the process. I'm quite disappointed of the other guy's attitude. Likewise, they're pretty bummed out about me because I was just like, you know, my revolutionary thoughts was going fucking spiraling into, you know. So it was a weird situation where we're like, you know, and also this is such a common thing. I think about this a lot because we were young at the time. I mean, I was 25 when we made the record. David was 22.
Damn.
We were not equipped to deal with these emotions. We were not equipped to deal with, like, me and David being best friends, and then we're not really best friends. We couldn't talk about it. You know, like, it was, you know, that when you're young, you're like, oh, there's some shit going on, and there's no way for you to communicate that because no one ever told you to. So instead, there's a lot of passive aggressive nonsense going on, or people just sit in the van fucking quiet. So it was like 6 months of that. And then finally it came to a halt in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're like, I mean, we're done. Like, this is over.
I mean, I've been on some stinker tours before when the vibe in the band is just not good. And
Yep.
it's just, I mean, it's soul sucking to say the least, man, you know?
Yeah.
So it's such an interesting story about how you make this record that goes on to really honestly, and it's pretty amazing to be able to say there's not really that many records in music that are kind of that change the direction of a genre. I get that record inspired so many people,
Yeah.
you know, and that's absolutely incredible to think, you know, where you guys were at when that shit happened, you know,
Yeah.
you know, so the band breaks up, you know, in Atlanta, whatever, everyone, you know, kind of just goes their separate ways, and you and your spiraling revolutionary mind,
Yep.
you take that and you start the International Noise Conspiracy.
Yeah. Like the day after.
The day after, right? So, and
so
yeah, go ahead.
So we broke up in Atlanta, and we played 3 shows, and then we had like a band meeting, and we're like, you know, someone said like, we need to go home. And then I said, if we go home, it's done. And everyone's like, yeah, it's done then. And then we're like, well, we don't really have any money, so we need to tour our way back to DC, which is another like 7 shows. So we played a bunch of shows as a broken up band, which is super weird. We're like, yeah, so last night we broke up, and here we are playing in fucking, you know, Gainesville or something like that. Oh, that's so weird. I mean, the vibe was actually a bit better for the last week because it was kind of like, yeah, we're done. Whatever. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. I had the Noise Conspiracy idea already before Refused broke up because I was like, in my mind, I'm like, this is not going to last. Like, this is, you know, you can feel it. And I came home from the States. Chris and David, they went to California and worked at the Revelation warehouse, which is another story in itself.
No way, really?
Yes, that's what they did. They were like, we're going to break up. We'll just fly to, because they were hanging out with Vic Martin. And they were like, we'll just fly over and work at the Rev warehouse for a couple of months. That's what they did after Refused broke up.
Amazing.
It's amazing. And I went home and I moped around. I would say I moped for maybe a week, and then I called, because I already knew, like, these are the people that's going to be in my band.
Yeah.
You know? And then after a week, I called everyone. It's like, hey, let's just do this. Let's start practicing. And then like a month later, we recorded our first 10 songs or something like that. we just went full blast, you know?
Yeah, it did happen super quick. And I remember, you know, there was a lot of times when our paths crossed, you know, during that time, or actually later on, like the Arm Love time and stuff like that. But it was it was a super cool band. And, you know, it's like the Survival Sickness record, awesome record, came out in 2000. Now, politically speaking, okay, where, yeah, where, like, when did that all happen? Where did it come from? Like, you know, like, when did you really start developing your political mind? And, you know, it seems like it's the main source of inspiration lyrically for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's a, you know, that's a pretty classic punk thing, but you have a very unique and special gift the way you do it. So where did that all kind of develop in you?
Well, first, as we talked about earlier, I mean, it was a part of, like, you know, just mother's milk of punk rock, basically. You had all your Dead Kennedys and your Clashes and all those bands. So early on, early days Refused, I got kind of into the idea about getting more political. It's interesting. One really big thing for me was when the first Gulf War happened, Bad Religion put out a 7-inch, which was a split with Noam Chomsky.
I remember. I have that. Yeah, I got that one.
Yes, I still have that. And I started reading the Chomsky stuff, and I'm like, mind blown. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I would say the first Refused record, This Just Might Be the Truth, that's just me, like, taking paragraphs from Noam Chomsky books and just pasting them into punk rock. And then around that time, say 94, 95, I started hanging out with, like, you know, like the socialists or anarchists of my hometown, and I got really into that. And then I really educated myself. I didn't really finish school. I just kind of a dropout, but for 2 years, no more, probably 4 years time, I only read political literature, and I had a timer by the side of my bed. So I read 3 hours every day of just political literature for years, because I was like, we played a show and someone was passing out flyers to this punk guy, and someone started asking him about these flyers, and he didn't really know how to respond to it. And I'm like, fuck, man, if I'm gonna be this fucking loudmouth megaphone kind of guy, I need to be able to back up the things that I'm talking about. I need to be able to really analyze the world according to my ideas, and then be able to coherently explain to people what it is that I'm talking about. So for years, I mean, I would say probably from 96 to early 2000s, I didn't read any novels. I didn't read any, like, you know, if it wasn't political theory, I didn't read it for years. So that was kind of, you know, and then when we started Noise Conspiracy, like, from the get-go, it was, like, very clear that this is going to be really revolutionary, really talk about these issues, really talk about capitalism and, you know, all of that, but doing it in a different suit, so to speak, you know.
Yeah, man, that's pretty cool. And that's very, you know, it's super smart that you were able to have the wherewithal to know that, you know, people were going to scratch beneath the surface and see what you were made of. And you had to be there to back it up, you know, and that's pretty cool. That reading 3 hours a night to a timer, that's some Black Panther shit right there, man.
Yeah. What I felt, I got kind of manic about it, because I kind of, in my mind, I was like, I wanted to become a professor of political thought, you know, but my grades were horrible. So I was like, I'll just stick to playing music. And I had a lot of friends around that time that were super academia, and they're really, you know, the university work. So I've actually basically read what they were studying at school, but just on my own time. And as I said, like, I think a lot of it, I wanted to be able to back up what I was talking about. Because if you're a punk band or any type of rock band, people don't really try to get at you. They're like, they're just a band, they just play music. But whenever you go up on stage and say shit like, I don't like the way capitalism is killing our planet, there'll be thousands of people wanting to attack you, because you are outspoken, you have ideas. So I was like, I need to be able to sort of, you know, I need to be able to answer the questions that people have. And I need to be able to hold myself responsible for the bullshit that I'm talking about, basically.
Yeah, man. That's dope, man. That's dope. There's not a lot of people like that out there. There really isn't, it's like it's crazy, nowadays especially there's so many people talking nonsense or repeating headlines that they read. They don't even bother to read the story anymore,
Yeah, yeah,
It's just like that's all they care about. So, International Noise Conspiracy put out 5 motherfucking records, which
yep.
is absolutely amazing. 99 to 2008. What was it like? You did Arm Love with Rick Rubin. You did 2 records with Rubin, right?
Yes. Cross my
Okay.
calling and love. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that? I need some Rubin juice. I need some Rubin
Yeah.
juice. Did you get Couch Rick Rubin, or did you get was he invested? What was that? What was that like? Talk to me about it.
We got both of them. So the first record we did, Arm Love, um, he was there the whole time. He was really involved. Um, I was in LA, so we did all the basic tracking, we did everything, and then I was in LA for 6 weeks doing vocals with Rick every day. Fucking wild. I mean, the my hotel and my travels back and forth costed more than New Morning costed to record. Just that for me costed more money. Uh, Rick was great. He was very hands on with my singing. He was like, there was one time I was singing, I was doing some wailing stuff, and he's like, "Stop that!" And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "Doesn't sound good." I'm like, "But I want it to be soul." And he just looked at me. He's like, "You're not a soul man." I'm like, "Oh man, oh, wow, that's hard." But
Woo!
yeah, but in my catalog, Armed Love is the record where I learned how to sing properly because of Rick, because he was so invested. And I mean, I'll show up at the studio, and it's weird. I mean, I'm in LA by myself, basically. Just, I'm
Yeah.
walking concerts. People, I show up at shows, they're like, "How do you get it?" I'm like, "I walked." And they were like, "That's 20 blocks." I'm like, "Yeah, it took me a while." It's like, I didn't have a car. There was no Ubers or anything. So I was walking everywhere. I was there by myself, but he drilled me really hard. And some days I'll show up and he's like, I start singing. He's like, "Dennis, your voice does not sound great. Go home." I'm like, "Oh man, I've been here for 20 minutes. He's like, "Yeah, we'll do it again tomorrow." But it was cool. I mean, it was very much a surreal experience. I mean, when you're hanging out and you're like, got a bit of a cold, and he's like, "Well, go up to the oxygen tent and you can lie there for an hour." I'm like, "I guess, yeah, why not?" So it was interesting. And then the second record, um, yeah, he kind of showed up once in a while, left some
Yeah.
notes, and that was it. But then at that point, I think we know what he wanted. And I mean, we were working with Greg Fidelman at the time, and Greg was like, we're like, "Oh, what about this part?" And Greg's like, "No, Rick's not gonna like that." I'm like, "All right." So I mean, all the technicians, engineers they work with, they all knew. I mean, they knew like that overdubs Wix he's gonna delete. So it was interesting to be able to record with like the best engineers in the best studios with the best producer in the world. I mean, it's like it's such a privilege. Like very few people get to do that. So I'm insanely grateful. However, American Recording did kill International Noise Conspiracy, because it was like we got signed and then it was like a super decline, into nowhere.
Yeah, that's one of those like I think every band, if you stick around long enough, you got one of those stories where it's just like the label, it just ends up just tanking, and it's like
Yeah.
one of the cool things I was stoked to hear about that is I think every singer kind of has that record where they kind of truly discover like their singing voice or like a next level for them almost. And 6 weeks doing vocals, that's an emotional journey. That's a roller coaster ride. It's like yeah, it's like on our second record with Michael Beinhorn, it was a lot of the same thing. You walk in, say hello, he'd be like, "Your voice sounds like shit. Get out of here." That type of thing. But very similar. That's where I really, really learned how to sing and how to appreciate my voice and how to like grow and really took the art of singing seriously for the first time, because I think
Yeah.
a lot of us who came up in punk and who came up, in hardcore, a lot of it is for the most part, when you got the microphone, it's all about honesty and intent and lyrical, just like truth. And and performing, it's all about going crazy and stage
Yeah,
diving and getting the crowd to go crazy and all that. And so a lot of times your actual vocal development is the last thing you're worried about,
totally.
and
Yeah,
and
totally.
it's really cool to have that kind of evolution of the voice as you go on, through your musical career. So is singing something now, that you love, or is it still, it's like, where do you put, like, performing, writing lyrics, and the actual singing aspect of being a front man? Are they all pretty equal loves of yours, or is there one that you don't, really like?
Well, no, I like all of them. I think that it's interesting because with a lot of my bands, I mean, both Refused and Invasion, I'm not really the songwriter, but I write the lyrics, I write the melodies, and I sing. So that's an important part of it. And then, I mean, for me, and I think it was similar for you, when I first started in like Step Four and early Refused, I wasn't a great singer, and it was a lot of like, yeah, it's good enough
Yeah.
because I go crazy. So you'll have me in the band because I go crazy and I get shit done. And so for a long time, I think my going off was a way of like kind of masking the fact that I wasn't a great singer, and I think you
Yeah.
can relate to
Oh,
this.
hell
Like,
yeah.
I'm just a guy that goes crazy. Like, yeah, he's in the band, he's wild. So that was it for a long time. But then when I actually became a good singer and I actually learned how to sing, I think I took the performance part also very seriously, because in the early days, it was mostly like, just grab the microphone and we'll see what happens. We'll fucking just go bananas. But then with Noise Conspiracy, that's when I started honing in on the dancing and the actual moving and like how do I present myself with the flow of the music. So I think at the same time I took that very seriously. And I mean, if people ask, I think I'm much more a performer than I am a singer, but I do really like to sing these days, which back in the day, that was
Yeah.
definitely not top of the agenda. It was like, yeah, well, I'm also a singer, but mostly I just go in the crowd and I throw stuff and, it's good.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a really cool kind of individual journey, I think, for everybody out there, singing in a band and fronting a band. It's like it happens when it happens. It's like, for me, it took so long for me to kind of actually realize, to take singing seriously, to take my role in the band seriously. It was just like I just was always just kind of expecting it to end or whatever, and it was just it. And then finally it was like, okay, we're like 3 records in, and it's like,
Yeah.
like let's just start developing a little bit. And honestly, you look back at it and you always think, you'd wish you'd taken it seriously, at least for me, a little bit sooner. But going back to what I said, it's like, that's everyone's path. It's just, it happens
Yeah.
the way it's supposed to happen. But there is such a beautiful moment when you kind of step into, like your calling as a singer, as a writer, as a performer, and start taking it seriously and start
Yeah.
investing yourself in it.
Yeah.
It's really an amazing experience to sing in a band, to front a band, to direct a crowd, to be on stage.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the best feeling in the world.
It is. Now, I mean, you must have learned a lot from doing the mariachi band,
Big time.
because I mean
Big
that's a
time, man.
whole different approach to singing. That then you have to sing. You can't just, because I mean, you need to, that both in the early days. There's a lot of kind of barking, just like
Yeah.
it's good enough. But then when you actually have to, because that's the thing, like you really need to sing. And I mean that's kind of that's got to be. I mean the same thing for me when you come into the room with Rick Rubin. It's like it's not good enough to be okay. Like you need to be great at what you're doing. And he drilled me. Like he was a taskmaster. Like he was like, no, you can't sing like that. No, that's not good enough. That's not, and it really taught me, like to trust my voice. Because that's the thing too that I thought a lot about for years. When you're doing songs, especially like maybe Refused, but also when we did in early Invasion days, because we're all punks. So as soon as we're a bit uncomfortable, we're like, we'll just speed up the tempo and then, just scream a little bit, it'll be fine. To learn how to trust your voice and be like, just me singing this is going to be good enough. I don't need to do a handstand or push over the amplifiers. Just me singing this is going to be good enough. And that for me, like that was really hard because I was so used to, being that guy that just like, I just go over the place. And then when you just, okay, now you just have to stand there and sing. I'm like, oh, this is super scary, you know?
Yeah, it is, but it's honestly it's the natural evolution too as an artist, you know. It's a cool thing to like that's how you grow, you know what I mean? A lot of
Yeah.
people, I think a lot of people look at something like that as maybe you know, like a negative, but it's no way is it a negative. It's such a positive to step into your own voice like that.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, what do you think who what makes a good front man or front woman to you? What do they got to have? What are the characteristics?
Well, I wouldn't say not necessarily a great singer, but a commanding voice, like something that people pays attention to. And then, I mean, it is also about, I think, them being comfortable in that role. Because when you see singer and they're not really comfortable with that spot, that's not good ever. But if you see someone that kind of like, I'm here, I'm owning the stage. I don't really care about what you know the crowd's doing, but I'm just going to own this place right here. That's always a good front man or front woman. That's someone like PJ Harvey or like a Nick Cave or an HR, where it's just like it's a commanding presence. You know, I think that's like, for me, that's the type of front people that I really like.
Yeah, man. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Okay, so going back now, let's go. International Noise Conspiracy over. What? How was that? How did that end? Was it just it was time to move on?
It fizzled out.
It
It
just
was,
fizzled.
yeah. I quickly recap. So we got signed to American Recordings. Rick Rubin. It's fucking fabulous. We got signed to American Recordings. Island Def Jam. We
Yeah.
record the record. It's great. We start touring. We do Coachella headline. The main, not headline, but we play the main stage at Coachella. And the same day, Rick Rubin says, "American's going to move to Warner. You'll have to wait to put the record out." So we toured for a year on the record that wasn't out. The record comes out on Warner like a year and a half after it was supposed to come out. The reviews come out and people are like, well, we heard this record a year and a half ago, whatever, you know. And then we did the second record with Rick Rubin, and he moves American to somewhere else, like some other from Island Def Jam to Sony to whatever, like another major label. And the major label looks at Noise Conspiracy. They're like, what the fuck's up with these guys? They sold like 2,000 records of the last record, and it costs like $150,000 to record. And so Rick's like, yeah, but we recorded the second record with Rick. He was super cool. And then the record came out on Vagrant, and they said, we'll give you $1,000 to shoot a video. I mean, you just got $100,000 record. Yeah, you get $1,000 to shoot, $1,000 to shoot a video. We're just like, yeah, this is, you know, when you're feeling it's like,
Yeah.
it's, you know. And then we were supposed to tour China. So me and Inge, the bass player, we went to China a couple of days early, and the other guy is supposed to meet up with us in Shanghai. When we come to Shanghai, the tour manager or the Chinese guy that booked the tour, he's like, there's a problem. Like the government decided no foreign bands are allowed to play here this week because it's like the whatever 60-year anniversary of the People's Republic. So you can't play. And we're just like, what? So the other guys are actually like, they're in the taxi going to the airport, and we call them and we're like, we can't play. Like, if you want to come and hang out in China, you can come and hang out in China. But they're like, no, we're not going to come to China. So me and Inge traveled China for 2 weeks by ourselves, went to all the shows, just hung out. And that was it. That was like, yeah, I guess we're done now.
Yeah, well, hey, that's at least that's an interesting way to end the band, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty wild. What was China like at that time? I've never been to China, man.
I've been there a bunch. It's wild. I mean, the
Yeah.
first tour Noise Conspiracy ever did was in China. We were the first Western rock band to tour China. We went there in 1999 and played 14 shows over the course of a month. It was fucking madness and pandemonium. We could do an entire episode of just how crazy that was. And then we went back we went back there a couple of years later, and then in 2009 was like the last. And then, you know, it was great, and it is great. It's like when we were there the first time, no one knew about punk rock. Like, they had a punk club in Beijing called Scream Club, and there's 20 people hanging out there. But it's great. I mean, the people love music. They really love live music. And INVSN actually went there a couple of years later, and it's great. A lot of cool music, a lot of cool people.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Has Invasion been something that has kind of just weaved in and out of other projects that you've been doing? How long has that band been going?
I mean that. I mean since 2010 probably. So I mean it's been going on for a long time, and it's when we started Invasion, it was like my main band. It was like, okay, this is the band. This is what I'm doing. Noise Conspiracy is done. Let's do Invasion. Let's do like this band for real. Um, and then we did 2 records in Swedish, and then Refuse got back together. So that kind of disrupts the movement. So
Yeah.
Invasion has been one of those bands where it's like it is in many ways my main band, but it's also a band that's kind of plagued by like every 3 years we can do stuff because of life basically. And so it's been we're putting out a record this spring, which I'm super excited about. So it's it's these are my best friends. They're like a really
Awesome.
bunch of people, and we it is one of those bands that I put a lot of hours and a lot of heart into.
Yeah, well, the songs are great, man. I mean, it's a really cool band. I was just watching I forget the song title, but the video where you guys are putting paint all over your faces.
Yes,
That's a great
yeah,
tune, man.
yeah,
That's an awesome song.
yeah. It's a great band. It started out as I had a power pop band called the Lost Patrol Band for a little bit in the same era as Noise Conspiracy. I wanted to have a band where we could just Noise Conspiracy was kind of scattered all over Sweden, and I wanted a band where we could just practice and play. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
did a power pop band, and that kind of morphed into Invasion. First 2 Invasion records are more like Swedish punk, and then it became a weird post-punkish type of band. And then the last 2 records, the one that's come out now and the last one, we was like, we don't want to write with guitars anymore. We want to write differently and get away from like guitar music. So everything is just like it's a lot of it's very percussive, a lot of drums, a lot of bass, a lot of
Awesome.
keyboards. Yeah,
Cool, man. Looking forward
yeah,
to it. Now, you're a smart human being now, so you had to know, okay, as you're doing International Noise Conspiracy, Invasion, you dropped the AC4 records, which are amazing, by the way.
thank you.
AC4 2008, 2013, you got 2 records, right? They're
Yeah,
self-titled. What's the second record called?
burn the world or some.
Burn the World. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, something like
Classic,
that.
classic pissed off, Burn the World.
Yep.
But those records are great. But as this, is going on, you have to be aware of the record that Shape of Punk to Come has become.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
are you at this, are you kind of plotting and scheming eventually, Refuse is going to get back together, or are you just like still fuck it, burned from it? Like, were you ever thinking as the record got bigger and bigger and bigger and more people were influenced by it, did you know that the reunion was coming?
No, I thought up until like the fall of 2011, I no, I didn't see it coming. I mean, I was playing with David and AC4.
Yeah.
We could sometimes talk about like what would a Refuse reunion be like, kind of a hypothetical, kind of like, could we pull it off? Like, what would it mean? But there's always the caveat of like, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to do that. We got the offer from Coachella a couple of times, and every time like, no, it's not going to happen. I remember one time we had the offer from Coachella, a lot of money, we turned it down. And we're playing with AC4 in a small town in Sweden called Borås in front of 8 people. And I'm just looking at David, I'm like, yeah, we chose this. This is fucking awesome. Like 8 people, no one really cared. So I never thought it was going to happen. I didn't see it happening because there's so much like, I think we had a lot of pride in like, we broke up and it was kind of, we made that into a big deal. I mean, I wrote some manifesto and it was like a big
Yeah.
song and dance about that. So I didn't see it happening. And then we got the offer and David called me and he said, let's just see what the other guys say. And we'll see what happens. And a couple of months went by, maybe 2 months went by. So I kind of forgot about it. I'm just saying, yeah, it's not going to be in a Refuse reunion. And then he calls me maybe November 2011. He's like, yeah, we're doing it. I talked to Chris and John. We're doing it. I'm like, wait, are you serious? He's like, yeah. I'm like, should we get together and practice first? He's like, no, let's do it. And that was it. And up until that minute, I was like, it's never going to happen. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. And then then that happened, and we're still around like almost 10 years later, which also, because when we did the reunion in 2012, that was it. We were supposed to do like 15 shows, and we ended up doing 80 shows that year. And then we just continued, which was not a part of the plan at all, basically.
Yeah, but I know everyone's glad you guys did continue, because
I'm super stoked.
Yeah, I mean, you got 2 other records out, Freedom and War Music, that are both great. Bronx got to play with you guys on some of those first reunion shows, and they were absolutely incredible. The vibe was just, people were so excited, to see you guys and to hear those tunes, and that was something that was really cool. So, you got Refused, Invasion, International Noise Conspiracy, Step Forward, AC4. You got all this stuff. I wanted to talk to you about legacy, and I wanted to, because one of the cool things about music and about creating something is that, if you're lucky, it's going to be around, long after, you aren't, so it's like something that is going to stand the test of time. And I was wondering, if you do think about legacy, and going into, I want to get into fake names too, because that's one of my favorite things that you've ever done, and as you look back through all this stuff, does it, I mean, you got probably released over 20 records now, easily,
I think it's almost 40 full-length records.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's absolutely amazing, so when you think about, your career so far, you look back on things, what does it kind of mean to you to have, to have this kind of vast catalog of basically, the story of your life sonically? I mean, from everything from, high school up to now. So when you look back on everything you've done so far, how do you feel about it? And where do you think you want to go next?
I mean, I feel great. It's interesting with music and how you create music, because a lot of it's like, it's a spur of the moment thing. Like you'll have a band or you have a project, and then, I mean, something like if we take a record like Shape, I mean, you wrote and recorded that record over a span of maybe 4 months. So it's 4 months of my life that's forever going to define who I am, which is amazing about music. Sometimes I think about the Fate Void split LP. And like, that's all recorded like one day. and I still think about that, how that, like, that's a testament to their lives and something that frozen in time. And we think about that record all the time and we analyze it. And I mean, for them, it was like a day of their lives, they record that. And that's quite fascinating with music, because a lot of it's like, you'll go back and you hear stuff and you're like, oh shit, I don't remember this song. That's fucking wild. Like so I'm insanely grateful of the way my life turned out. Cause as I said, when I was a young kid, I was like, this is going to be a year or 2 tops. I'll record a demo. I'll have a demo tape that I can sell to my friends, basically. And here I am. And it's like, this fucking, as you said, it's like the testament of my life. Like, I've all done all this stuff. And going into COVID and lockdown and everything, I started thinking about that. I'm like, well, we need to, I mean, I started organizing a lot of stuff at home and kind of like digging out old demo tapes and stuff. And so I did that Step Forward record and when lockdown happened, because the guy asked me for years, and I'm like, I need to do this because it's cool. And it's a real, like, something that we did. It really changed a lot. And this year is 25 years since Songs to Fan the Flames of Discontent came out. So I put together a really awesome, ultimate edition of that, where it's like, it's a double LP with the second LP, just demos, and there's unreleased tracks. There's 2 songs with David singing, and it's like, and we did liner notes and photos. It's actually coming out next year because of vinyl production, but and we're gonna do something similar with the first Refused record. I'm sure Shape of Punk is turning 25 in 2 years. I'm sure we're gonna do something about that. So that's a part of like how do you keep the legacy alive, but at the same time, like keep on creating and keep on pushing. Because I mean, I'm not a nostalgic person. I'm not someone that like, you know, you meet a lot. You live in LA where a lot of people like they put out one record and then they coast off of that record their entire lives. It's like, you know what I mean? There's those people that are like, well, I was in fucking that band from the 80s and that's still their whole thing. And I'm like, I'm not like that. I just like, I'm in these new projects. I'm doing these new records. I'm doing new music. But then as you grow older, you're like, well, maybe I should, you know, take care of the old stuff as well. So I mean, it is interesting. It's an immense privilege to be able to have that catalog while still being in 4 active bands at the moment, which is fucking crazy, you know?
It is, man. But it's super cool to be able to look back at everything you've created, you know. And it's like I think you know, longevity is such an amazing thing in art, you know, because it's like the more you go, you know, the more you create, it kind of just like it all kind of comes back around with everything you've done, you know, like your old stuff appreciates the new stuff, you know, it represents, you know, where you're at now and growth and evolution and all this stuff. And it's so cool to be able to have something tangible that you could actually look back and listen to, you know, and just go all the way through. You know, it's amazing. So fake names, let's talk about it real quick.
Yes, I want to tell you something first, though.
Yeah, hit me.
About the Bronx. When we got back together in 2012, we played a couple of really shaky shows. It was fucking, we weren't ready. I mean, you know, we practiced a lot. We you know, like, it was a big deal. Like, people losing their minds when we first got back together. And we did a couple of secret shows. We did Coachella first weekend, and then in between, we played with you guys and the Hives in San Francisco at the Wharfield.
Yeah.
And you guys were fucking amazing. I remember being on the side or watching you go into the crowd. I'm like, oh fuck. And then the Hives played. I'm like, oh my God, what are we doing here? You know, like that sense of like, we're way, you know, like, I don't know if we can pull this off. And then we played and it was fucking fabulous.
Oh,
that show in San Francisco, that was the show we knew that we had it. Like, that was a show I'm like, okay, yeah, we can actually do this. So, but I remember just seeing you guys in the Hives and I'm like, I need to bring it tonight. I need to fucking deliver.
Dude, and you did. And that show honestly was one of the best, you know, memories for me and for us as a band because of the lineup and just because of the energy and, you know, knowing everyone the way we did. You know, it was so fucking cool. And I remember you guys had that big ass curtain too. You had that big old curtain that you dropped, and that was a great way to kick it off. That show was legendary. I'm glad you had a good time. It was a really good show.
The whole room was like electric. It was like, and then you guys, I mean, everyone was great, but that was the night where we're like, yeah, I think we're back. I think this is gonna be all right.
Hell
so
yeah.
I just wanted to drop that in there. Kudos to you guys. It was fantastic. And then we took you on tour for that 2012 reunion.
We did a bunch of shows. We ended up in Canada. I remember David and I wrestling in the back of a kitchen somewhere at some point in Vancouver, not Vancouver. I don't know where it was, wherever they do Sled Island Fest. But yeah, David and I we've had some good battles. We've had some good battles. So fake names: Brian Baker, Michael Hampton, Johnny Temple. You know, just an incredible lineup with you yourself, of course. How did that band come about? You know, talk to me about it, because the record, the first full length, is incredible. If you guys haven't heard it, you got to go check it out. You just put out an EP this year, right? And that's also incredible. And the vibe, sonically, it's you know, I hate to use the word nostalgic, but it is nostalgic, but it also feels super just you know, super present and current, and unlike really anything that you're hearing now. And the lyrics are great. Your voice sounds incredible on the records. So how did it come about?
So Michael Hampton was in SOA and Faith and Embrace, some of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
He was like, him and Brian Baker was like the guitar prodigies of DC, but they never played it in a band together. And Brian moved from DC down to Jersey and started connecting with Michael. And they're like, we should do a band together. We should, we should have a band. We never played in a band together. We're two great guitar players. Let's do this. Got Johnny on board. I think they're looking for a bunch of singers. And, I've seen Brian Baker around with Bad Religion. It's always like, oh shit, there's Brian from Minor Threat. Fuck, like that nasty junkyard, like I'm that nerdy guy,
Yeah.
And then we met. INVSN played a show with Girls Against Boys. So I met John Temple. He was super cool, super nice. And then we played Riot Festival, Refused. And Girls Against Boys were there because I met Johnny, and then Brian was there with Bad Religion. And we played Refused. And I met Johnny, and he's like, hey, what's up? We're talking. And then next day, because me and David stayed because it was the Misfits show.
Yeah.
So we're like, well, we're just going to stay to see the Misfits. So we're there all weekend just hanging out. And then Brian Baker just walks up to me. He's like, I have a new band with Michael Hampton and Johnny. Do you want to sing? And I'm like, yeah. No questions asked. I'm like, yes. I'll sing. Yes. And I was like, this is weird. And then they didn't get back to me for a couple of weeks. And I was like, was I dreaming this shit? Because my friend Andre that plays drums in INVSN, he's like, he's got a tattoo that just says 80s hardcore on his arm. So he's like, I called him. I'm like, fucking Brian Baker asked me to be in band with him. It's like, whoa, And then a couple of weeks went by. I'm like, maybe it's just a dream. And then they sent me a couple of songs. I did some demos at home. And then like, yeah, just come over and hang out. And I'm like, fuck yeah. And then I hung out with them, and they were like, do you like the Ruts? I'm like, I don't know. They're like, well, you have to like the Ruts. So the first night I met Michael Hampton. We're just listening to the Ruts all night. That was basically like the initiation and into being in Fake Names. And then, we were supposed to play because the record came out as the pandemic hit. So we're supposed to play around the record release, and it's fucking sad. But then we recorded a new EP, and I think we have a new full length. We have demos for a new full length. So yeah.
Awesome. And were those records, that was the first full length, was that recorded, did you record at home from Sweden, or was that studio? Did you do studio actual vocals for that record?
Yeah, I came to New York for a couple of days.
Awesome.
I did I came over, we practiced a couple of times. I think I did that twice. And then the third time I came over, they already done the basic tracking, but they were in the studio with me. I think we did the vocals in a day and a half, like old school, not like nowadays, like you have a month to do vocals. It was like, I think maybe 1.5 or 2 days we did all the vocals.
The Rick Rubin days are over.
Yeah. So it's great. And then the new EP is very much a COVID kind of experiment where everything is recorded, and then someone had the kind of impossible task of putting everything together. And on the EP, it's Brendan Canty plays drums, which is
hell yeah.
Yeah, which is, for me, I'm like, wait, that's the guy from Deadline and Fugazi. I'm like, that's not right. Like, so, it's pretty, for a guy that grew up with Minor Threat and Embrace and all those bands, it is a bit surreal. There's a lot of times where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in a band with those guys. Like, what the fuck happened? Like,
That's amazing. Yeah, I saw Brandon play with MC5.
Oh yeah.
It was awesome. It was awesome. He's a super great dude too.
Yeah. I never met him, which, it's weird. I never met him, but maybe one of these days.
Yeah. You think as things kind of continue to open up here a little bit, you think there'll be a Fake Names tour?
I hope so. At least shows. I don't really see it as like, let's go on the road for a couple of weeks, but I would love to do like a couple of West Coast shows and a couple of East Coast shows or some festivals. And I think everyone's down. I think it's just a matter of, like, as you're saying, things opening up. Brian's out with Bad Religion right now, or maybe he just came home. So, it's just a matter of finding the time. And I think we're going to record a record soonish. Because have, as I said, we have a full record with demos, so soonish. And this record, I also want to be in the room. I don't want to record it at home. So hopefully, I'll be able to come on over in a couple of months and maybe play a show or two or record some music.
For sure. All right, I don't want to take too much more of your time here, but I do need to ask you this question. You got over 40 albums which was absolutely insane. If you had to, if you get the time capsule question and you got to pick 3 recordings of yours to put in the time capsule to represent you as an artist, what would they be?
I think there would be, it would be Shape of Punk, even though I think War Music is a more cohesive record, but Shape of Punk, come on. It defined everything that I am as a person. Growing up in the north of Sweden, becoming a punk rocker, Shape of Punk, that's going to be with me forever. So Shape of Punk, I think probably I would also have to put New Morning, Changing Weather with Noise Conspiracy. I think that's a fantastic record.
Great record.
And then maybe it's the new one, but the INVSN record that's coming out next year. I think it's a fine piece of art. So those two.
Hell yeah.
But I might change, but yeah.
Right on, man. And lastly, I wanted to talk about you as a football coach.
Yes, please.
Because that's really fucking cool. I'm a big soccer fan, football, however you want to say it. So what's the team all about? When did you start coaching, and what kind of coach are you? Are you like an X's O's guy? Are you more the mental, what's your role on the staff? I'm dying to know. Do you give like political speeches at halftime? What are you doing?
So I went, it's going to get a bit existential, but when you play music and when you're an artist, I have a sense that I'm always on, every conversation, every record, every movie, something, to put out there. So I started playing football because it's like, it clears my head, it's like meditation. You can't think about all the other stuff. So I started playing pickup games with friends. I started playing with like a non-licensed league, whatever. And then 10 years ago, I hit up a friend and I said, you play in this 5th division team. Can I come and practice with you guys? I need to get in shape. And, and he's like, yeah. And I just became a fixture in that team. So I played in that team for 8 years. And then I tore my ACL 3 years ago, which is fucking bad news.
Brutal.
So for the last 3 years, I've been working out a ton to keep my leg in check. And then last year, I actually did a surgery. So for the last 10 months, I've been doing rehab. And I'm kind of glad we've had no shows. But when I tore my ACL, I was like, okay, shit, my football days are over. I got really bummed. And I was like, I don't know what to do, because those like twice a week we practiced, and then there's a game every weekend. I'm like, that's really, for my mental health, it was really good. And then a guy said, maybe you should just coach the team. We never really had a proper coach. It's always been like a player that's been like, I'll be the coach. So I was like, yeah. And I went and I got myself a coaching license. You can do that, like a proper coaching license. Went to a course, and then I started coaching the team. And I've been coaching the team for 3 years now. And the first year I coached, we were undefeated in the 5th division. So now we're in the 4th division.
Hell yeah.
And I'm very much the type of coach that my football tactical skills might not be the biggest, but I'm very good at making sure that everyone feels included. Everyone feels like they're part of the team. Okay, you're on the bench today. This is why. I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to put you in later. And I'm very much a coach that just makes everyone comfortable. I'm the kind of coach that just screams, that's fucking great, do it, that's awesome, come on, like you can do it. I never complain. I never give the guys a hard time. I'm very positive. And that's the type of coach I am. I'm very like, I'm just fucking excited and trying to infuse good energy and great ideas. I try to get them to meditate before the games, but that was a bit tricky. But yeah, there's a lot of like me saying like, if we do this together, we always win. It doesn't matter. I'm that type of coach.
Yeah, leadership, man. That's awesome. That's awesome. I would love to see that in real life, man, because it is. I mean, it's such a great sport, and that's a bummer that you hurt your ACL, and hopefully the recovery on that goes good. You'll probably be back running around for sure
I hope
at
so,
some point, But I'm glad that I'm glad that, football's been a place where you can go and kind of clear your head and shut it off for a little while. And then now turn it into a spot where you can kind of, lead guys and be a positive influence. That's really, really cool, man. Congrats.
I love it. And it's also funny because it's like when we coach, I use my screaming voice all the time. Like I always scream like, come on, that's great, come on, with my full-on fucking screaming voice. So a lot of guys are like, that's kind of funny that you're like, and I always show up in my suit. I always wear this suit and stuff. So I always show up in that and I'm just screaming from the sidelines, but all just positive stuff, just fucking reinforcement. But I do use my screaming voice a lot when I coach.
That's amazing, man. So, before we go, is there anything happening for you on, next year? Any plans? Are you touring or anything? When's the Fan to Flame coming out? Is that coming out early next year? Or still, who knows, the pressing plants?
Yeah, I think it's coming out early next year. So that's like the deluxe reissue edition that's coming out. And then, as I said, there's a new INVSN record coming out in the springtime. Cool. Called Let the Night Love You. I think it's a good title.
Yeah, it is.
So that's going to be some touring. But I mean, how the world is today too. Like everyone's supposed to go on tour because you can tour for 2 years. So there'll be some touring. I have a new punk band with Sarah from INVSN. We're recording a record in January. We're recording a record. I play guitar, which is fucking fabulous. I don't have to be the front man. Sarah plays bass and sings.
Awesome.
And I just play I also play the rhythm guitar. I don't even play the lead guitar. I just play the rhythm guitar. So we're doing that. And then new fake names. Refused started writing songs.
Awesome.
So I hope maybe end of next year, maybe we'll do some recordings and stuff. But, so I got a lot of stuff happening. A lot of action. Maybe not as much touring as I would like it to be, but it will happen.
But still productive, man. I mean, it's a good time right now to just be writing and to be creating. So that's awesome, man. I know we're all looking forward to anything you do musically, my man. Really appreciate you being on the podcast, Dennis. Great talking to you. Great to see your face. Great to catch up.
I miss you guys. I was excited that also you got Joe in the band. Fucking super excited.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, he's the man, man. It's been great. And we were able to get out this year and do a little bit of touring. And it was awesome, man. It felt really good. People were stoked on the shows, but we'll see. Who knows where the world's going right now. It's a crazy ass place.
I was quite jealous. I follow you guys on the social media. I'm like, oh man, those guys are out having fun. Like, I was quite jealous, but I'm also very excited. Put out a new record, go out tour. I fucking love it. So I hope to see you guys soon. I'm really, really hoping that I'll be able to make it to the States soon enough.
Oh, it'll happen. It'll happen. Right on, Dennis. I appreciate the time, brother. Have a good night.
Yeah, talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, buddy. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Oh yeah. That's a wrap on episode 24 of the Sailor Jerry podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thanksgiving. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Huge shout out to our very special guest, Dennis Lyxzén of Refused, INVSN, Fake Names. You can follow him at Dennis Lyxzén on Instagram. I'm 99.99% sure I'm getting that last name right. Dennis, I'm sorry if I fucked it up. You can follow Refused at Refused. Dennis is involved in a lot of different projects, musically, artistically, whatever. So the best thing to do is just follow him. You can Google him, obviously, if you want to track him down that way. Of course, you better be following at Sailor Jerry, at 213 Mattman. Don't forget that Sailor Jerry spiced rum is made the old school way, 92 proof, bold and smooth as hell. We'll see you guys in 14 days. Peace.